Hi, Rachel. I'm Vicky Scott. As you know, I'm a sleep coach and children's nurse. And I'd love you to tell us about yourself and how you got into being a children's dietitian.
Oh, hi Vicky. Thank you for inviting me to join you on our podcast. Um, so as Vicky said, my name is Rachel. I'm a dietitian and I've been a dietitian for nearly 20 years, but I've been working in paediatrics for about 8 years. So my current role, I'm mostly seeing children with allergies, selective or fussy eaters, and then children with growth concerns as well. So that covers most of my work. Um, from a personal point of view, I've got two boys myself. They're 8 and 6 now, so I've been through those early weaning and early sleep phases myself, as haven't you, Vicky?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, a lot of my role is talking to parents about what is normal in terms of feeding and growth, and what can we accept, what can we carry on with, and what are the signs whether something might be wrong. And trying to help them through that. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Lovely, lovely. So, just a little bit about me. So, yes, I'm working as a sleep coach at the moment, but historically, I qualified as a children's nurse from Great Ormond Street and from as an adult nurse after working at the Royal London Hospital. And I was a health visitor for many years. So I saw many children with normal development and what was normal for children. But obviously, in amongst that, there were children who had difficulties or challenges. And then we would try to refer to the right person when necessary. Um, so I've got a quite a extensive background in children's health visiting, children's nursing, and now sleep coaching. So it gives me quite a broad sort of spectrum of how, you know, what goes on in families. Because obviously, as a health visitor, I was visiting many families over the years. But really, as a sleep coach, what we do is typically we're working with the parent in through the parent so that they can help their children with their behaviour at night generally, but also we work with parents who are struggling with their children's daytime naps. And obviously we need to look at the whole picture of the child, what starts from early morning all the way in the 24 hours. So yes, it's a lovely job, and yeah, really enjoy that. So, but let's go back to you and hear a bit about the sort of things that you perhaps most frequently come across, in your service as a dietitian.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. So as I said, I get referrals to my service for many different reasons, but there are some themes that whatever the child has been referred for, sometimes these things pop up alongside. So I might get a referral for a child who's got one or more allergies, um, but then actually when we get to it, um, and possibly independent of the allergies, um, I'm picking up on things where maybe feeding isn't quite as it should be, or as parents are hoping for, or weaning is getting off to a slow start. And those things we'll kind of talk about in consultations as well.
Mm.
And then, of course, those things often tie in where we've got children who aren't feeding particularly well. It's not uncommon for them to have then sleep issues as well. I think
Yeah.
it's sometimes difficult to say which is the primary issue and which is the consequence. I don't know if you've got experience with that, Vicky.
Yeah, I think obviously basically with children with allergies, obviously they might have itchy skin, or very runny tummies, and so yeah, that can, both of those can disturb their sleep massively, particularly with eczema. But it's, I think, the trouble is for children is that once they start missing out on sleep, they get overtired, which then sort of leads to a sort of cycle of difficulties, really, because the more tired they get, they produce a hormone called cortisol, which can make them sort of run on empty, basically, and they can become more overtired, and the parents are overtired, and everything goes into a cycle of really, and the parents try something to fix the, their child, helping them to sleep more at night, and then that doesn't work, and they only try it for a short amount of time. So it's lack of consistency as well sometimes that can cause sort of troubles for parents. But I'm sure any parent watching this will be thinking, well, that's not exactly my child, but similarly, every child is an individual. So yeah, we absolutely look at the child's individual issues in each case. So yeah, I think early days with babies, obviously the baby is born and the parents are responding to those babies' cues just as and when they come up, so that the baby is every single want or need is responded to. But over time, as the weeks and months go on, if the parents really literally respond to those babies' needs, then it can get more difficult for various things. If they actually try to allow the baby to sleep and allow the baby to feed as soon as the baby wakes up, so that the feeding isn't connected as the time goes on, the months go on, to the going to sleep, that can help enormously with the baby learning to settle to sleep, because actually falling to sleep is a learned skill. It's not something that babies do automatically. But some children, because of their nature, their personality, do that much more readily than other children. I'm sure you see the different sort of personality types in your clinic, Rachel, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can, yeah, and I think I've seen same with feeding. I think in those very early days it's very baby led, and babies will give their hunger cues, and parents will feed them, and that's absolutely great. And then most children then start to settle into a pattern of slightly bigger feeds further apart. And then on top of that, then they'll start maybe sleeping a little bit of a bigger period through the night. So they're not having it through the night. And sometimes that happens just completely spontaneously, and other times it doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. And what age do you generally feel like babies should start falling into a bit more of a pattern with their naps and
I mean, again, it depends on the baby, very, very much. I think you can start, if the mother is well and has recovered well from the delivery, sort of maybe from 3 weeks, start instigating some sort of very gentle bedtime routine, so that the baby has some understanding that they're not in a TV room where the blue light is going to always disturb their sleep, and there's quietness in a darkened room, so that it becomes a routine. Maybe it's going to be at sort of 9 o'clock in the early days, but then that gets sort of earlier to 8, then 7 as time goes on, so that from sort of 4 months onwards, that there's a very definite routine involved. I mean, with or without a bath, some people's bath every other day or whatever, but there's a change of clothes. There's a sort of there's sorry, before that, there's sort of generally it's called bath story bed, is sort of bedtime routine, but some sort of method along those sorts of lines. I mean, with the little ones, it might be a lullaby. It could be yeah, a little look at a black and white book or something like that. But there's some sort of bedtime routine. So there's a difference between day and night, because it helps children initiate their circadian rhythms, because otherwise they it would be like they had sort of jet lag the whole time if their bedtime was at one stage at sort of 7 o'clock and then another time at midnight. So, and really by the time the baby is sort of 6 months old, a baby of normal weight, if they're progressing nicely on their centile chart, then a baby is quite able to go through the night, which could be, initially it starts at sort of maybe a 6-hour night and then a 7-hour night, and it goes on until sort of they can do like a 10-hour night without a feed. And there's various methods to help a child without letting them cry it out. And my service is not cry it out. There's various behavioral strategies we can use to help the baby to feel supported in their learning to fall asleep on their own, to self-settle, as we call it.
I think that's a big parental concern, is this sort of fear of the cry it out method. And I think when you talk about, asking parents to speak to other healthcare professionals or look for the support of a sleep consultant, that is probably one of their biggest causes of apprehension, is that they're going to be told to let the baby cry it out. So it's nice to hear that there are other options.
Oh, there absolutely are. And I should have said as well that I have had 3 boys myself I've now got grandchildren, and so I have instigated these methods with my own children without having them cry it out in any form whatsoever. There's a gentle sort of way that we can actually do this, that we work through the parents, as I say, though. So to fix this, it's often overtiredness. It's sometimes parents aren't aware of what we call the wake windows, about how children, if they go over their wake window, which differs at each age. It extends slightly as they get a bit older, obviously. Tiny weeny babies, newborns, they may be only awake for 3/4 of an hour, but that ability to stay awake extends. But as they get a bit older, if you overextend it by overstimulating the baby, then they can actually find it more difficult to settle to sleep. So it's a bit of a balancing act, really. And sometimes there's a way to shorten the wake windows to help that child to sleep, really. Because sometimes, maybe being pushed out in a pushchair sometimes can help lull the baby to sleep, which every parent knows. But obviously, if you do that every single time, then the child will assume that they only go to sleep in a pushchair. So yeah, that's how it sort of work. But
it isn't always practical.
Not always practical, no. Not in the middle of the night. And it obviously. But yeah, it's very interesting that babies are sort of round about the time they're ready to wean, which that they are ready to be able to sleep longer in the night. But it's not necessarily the only thing that makes it happen is to start weaning, is it?
No. And as we both said, it depends on the baby's personality sometimes as to how sort of easily these processes happen, and when parents need to intervene a little bit to give them a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so, if everything is going smoothly, baby's sleeping longer through the night, so they're not feeding through the night because they're sleeping, which is great. And then at that point, when we start weaning, generally babies who aren't feeding through the night will then have more interest in their first foods, which is going to help with the weaning process. So I do see some parents that are caught in a difficult situation where they've got a baby whose sleep is quite disrupted still through the night, so they're taking quantities of milk, and then when they're trying to initiate weaning and structure during the day, they're much harder because babies had lots of food all the way through the night, so they're not particularly hungry. So that's one of those early weaning challenges that I sometimes see.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, um and it's also parents are often worried about when do you give those first foods? Do when is the best time to give them, and what's the best time to give them, and the foods, and so do you want to talk about the parameters of what really a baby needs to be able to do to sort of take the weaning foods?
Of course, so there are some simple basic guidelines, boundaries that we would put in for most children. Um, and then there's a lot of grey areas where it's really up to parenting choice what path they choose to go down. But generally speaking, we're looking to start introducing solid foods at around 6 months of age. And it may be a little bit before or a little bit after. And that's not going to have any significant impact on baby as long as they're ready for weaning. And when we're looking for signs that baby is ready for weaning, we want them to have some good head control. So they might not necessarily be able to sit independently at 6 months, but they should have good head control. So if you're holding your baby and walking around with them, if they can kind of turn and look around the room and things like that, and not lose control of their heads doing that, then that's a really good sign that they've got the control there. Them showing you that they can pick up food and put it to their mouths. So before weaning, of course, is going to be picking up other things and putting it in their mouths, and all parents will see that quite frequently. And then the last one, which you won't really know until you start weaning, is whether they can swallow food. So one of the little hurdles that babies have to get over in the early stages of weaning is this kind of instinctive pushing out of the food with baby's tongue. So you'll put a spoonful of food in mouth and it will come straight back out again, and the babies will just push it out quite calmly and then look at you like they don't know what you're trying to do. And that's that kind of final hurdle. But I advise most parents on that is, it's unlikely that baby's going to get it first time. So do expect some food to be pushed out again, and that's absolutely fine. Doesn't mean that the baby doesn't want it or they don't like it. And it's certainly not on its own a sign that you should stop working through that weaning process. There are some things that are mistakenly seen for signs of weaning, which are usually associated with other things. So babies chewing their fists, some parents take that as a sign that babies are hungry, but it's quite often a soothing strategy for them. Waking up in the night more than usual and wanting extra milk feeds are also sometimes taken to be signs that weaning should be initiated. But Vicky, maybe you can help us out here and talk about reasons why babies might start suddenly waking a bit more at night.
Well, it could have something to do with around about sort of 4 months onwards, babies become quite distractible when they're actually feeding. So they sort of come off the breast in a public place or in a busy room or anything where there's something interesting going on, or their brothers and sisters are making a bit of a noise. And, instead of the baby contentedly sucking for, 10, 20 minutes, the baby is sort of on and off the breast, on and off the breast. So they actually haven't had a very good feed, but enough just to satisfy them. And then as the day goes on, mum is very busy, obviously. And then so that when they wake up at night, it's nice and quiet and calm and nothing's happening, and it's sort of semi-dark. And so the baby is going to feed well. So that may be one of the reasons why they start feeding more at night, because there's literally no distractions. So it's sometimes perhaps with a bottle-fed baby. Actually, I've had a case recently where the parents just hadn't thought to remember to increase. There's different size teats, and actually as they get older, they need a slightly bigger size teat, so the milk comes more rapidly and easily. Because if they're sucking on a sort of size 2 teat for a long time, it's going to wear the baby out, and they're like, no, I'm satisfied now, my blood sugar's gone up, I don't need any more. And then they have little tiny feeds all the time, and that can, so that at night then they're waking frequently. There's all sorts of reasons, many different sorts of reasons why this sort of, there's a different sort of difference. But generally, children are not regressing, they're going forward. So I think I would always like to look at why a baby is feeding so frequently at night and perhaps not eating so much during the day.
Yeah, that's really good, because I think the sort of keenness for parents to be progressing is something as well, isn't it? And
Yeah,
when babies do start waking up, and parents might feel that they've got through that part, and
yeah,
they're going back to it. Whereas, from what you're saying, Vicky, it sounds like actually it's a sign that the baby's developing,
yeah,
and getting more interested in
yeah,
things during the day. So actually, it's a positive thing. It shows that they're sort of
yeah.
taking more notice of their world.
Absolutely, because as a child reaches towards 6 months, they have as good vision as us, probably better than some of us in glasses. But they, and so it's, the world suddenly becomes a really interesting place from 4 months to 6 months. So it's fascinating, but they don't know what they're looking at, bless them. They don't know, but it's all very interesting, particularly when they've got bigger brothers and sisters and televisions going on, and lots going out on in a public place, or wherever the baby's being taken to, baby massage or baby sensory or whatever. So yeah, it's there's a lot happening for a baby, at those sorts of stages. Yeah. So you were saying with the weaning, that just to, for parents to be just consistent giving the baby foods. If they seem to sort of stick their tongue out and get rid of it, it's not that they don't like it. It's just that you need to try again tomorrow and see that
Yeah,
eventually they will start, sucking the food into their mouth rather than spitting it out, really. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And the NHS web pages have got some really helpful information about how to initiate weaning, and ideas for what first foods to give, and give you those signs that things are going well, or if there's reason to kind of delay a little bit more.
Mm.
But yeah, if you're in doubt, um, those Googling those NHS web pages on weaning can be really helpful. They've got videos on there, and they will show those babies pushing food out with their tongue, and they will explain that that's a completely normal part of the learning process. And
Yeah.
weaning at this stage, solid foods, it's not really about nutrition. They're getting all of their nutrition from their milk still. So this is really about them learning a new skill, and enjoying the, what they're starting to try, which is so it should be a fun experience, not a stressful one. And that's what I try and support parents, so that they can have that fun experience with weaning.
Yes. Um and also it says which foods to avoid, doesn't it? Which are far less than there used to be, which is really helpful for parents, I think. And it's about, really, it is messy, a messy stage, but actually, um it's been shown that if babies are allowed to make that sort of a mess, then, actually the sooner they learn how to feed themselves nicely, well. So yeah, there's a lot in family meal times with weaning babies as well. It's it can be challenging for parents, because they've, obviously, there's so much to clear up as well as to prepare before the meal. But yeah, it's a stage that they need to go through. So certainly. Um, so
Yeah, so the do's and don'ts of weaning have changed a little bit over the years, and I think there's probably fewer don'ts, um, in terms of what you can give babies, we now fully recommend introducing all of those allergen foods right from the start, from 6 months really. So things like peanuts, egg, fish, wheat, all of those sorts of things. We don't want parents to delay introducing those foods. And I know that, you know, it was different 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Those foods were things that you might delay. But really now we're looking to not add salt and sugar. We want to avoid whole nuts because of the choking, but nut butters and ground nuts in foods are absolutely fine. And we want to avoid honey until the age of 1. But really, as well, if you go on the NHS website pages, it will go through that list. But the list of don'ts is a lot shorter than it used to be, which is nice.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So was that really what everything we were talking about in the first year, I think, really? That's because I think we're expecting to do a second podcast with to discuss things that are sort of more complicated in the baby's life, to do with nutrition and maybe sleep too, and obviously sleep too. So
yeah, I think today we've talked about what normally happens, haven't we? What
yeah,
what we expect to happen generally.
yeah,
So yeah, in our second podcast, maybe it'd be good to talk about when weaning and sleeping is not going according to plan,
yeah,
and some of the underlying causes for that.
yeah. That's great. So I'll say goodbye for now, shall I, Rachel? And then we can
All
perhaps
right, Vicky,
see you in a short while for the second podcast.
that would be lovely. Thanks.